Hi, it's Steve. Today we'd like to show you how to change the lower door hinge on your refrigerator. It's a really easy repair. Let me show you how we do it. Now, to do this repair, although it is not necessary, you may wish to turn the refrigerator off during that procedure. So simply open up the fresh food door, locate the temperature control, turn it to the off position, and then we can start the repair. Just remember to turn it back on to the proper setting once you complete the repair. Now, our next step will be to remove the hinge cover. On some models it may be held in place with a screw, others it simply snaps on. If it's just a snap-on version, just push it slightly forward and lift up on it. Remove it and set it aside, and that will give us access to the 3 screws that secure the top hinge to the cabinet, so we'll need to remove those next. Those are typically a 5/16 hex head screw. Now, as we remove the last screw, you want to make sure that you support that door. Well, the magnetic gasket should hold it in place. You can just pivot that hinge around and leave it in the door. Take the freezer door in both hands, open it slightly, and then lift it off of the center hinge, and we'll set that aside. Our next step will be to remove the 2 5/16 screws that are on the outside edge of that center hinge. So with a 5/16 wrench, we're just going to loosen those a few turns. Now next we'll remove the screw on the left-hand side of that hinge. Be sure to support that fresh food door as you remove that screw. Then just open the door slightly. Allow that hinge to slide out from underneath the 2 outside screws, and then you can lift it away. You can close that door back up and make sure that the magnet is holding it in place. Now, with the door temporarily secured, we'll set that center hinge aside. Then grasp both sides of that fresh food door. You can open it, lift it off of the bottom hinge, and then we'll set that door aside. Now next we'll remove the 2 mounting screws for that lower hinge. Again, they're 5/16 hex head screws. We'll lift off the old hinge, then remove the protective spacer on the back side of that hinge. You may need a putty knife to separate that without damaging it. As well, you want to remove the spacer washer on top of that hinge pin. Slide that off. We'll install it onto the new one if it's still in good shape. If it's damaged, you'll want to replace that as well. Line up the spacer on the back side. And start one of the screws. Don't tighten it until we have the other one lined up as well. Then we're going to tighten both of those securely. And once we have that lower hinge firmly mounted, we're ready to put the door back on. Now, just before we reinstall that door, we're going to add a little bit of food grade grease to the top of that thrust washer. Then we'll lift the door into place. Make sure it sits firmly down on that hinge pin. Swing the door into a closed position and have somebody support it, and then we can put the center hinge back in. We'll begin by placing the hinge pin into the top of the door, pivot the hinge around, and then we'll make sure that we slide the hinge under those 2 cabinet mounted screws. Then we'll lift up on it enough that we can install the screw on the left side. Tighten that securely. Then we'll tighten the 2 screws that we loosened. Again, make sure that there is enough lubrication on that center hinge pin, and then we'll lift the freezer door into place. Set the door down on top of that hinge pin, swing it into position, and then we'll line up the top hinge. Now, when installing the screws for that top hinge, we're not going to tighten any of them until we have all 3 of them started. Make sure they go in straight and easily so that they're not cross-threaded. Now, before we tighten them, we want to check the alignment of that freezer door to the fresh food door. You should maintain an even gap between the surfaces of both doors, as well as a even spacing along the top of the cabinet. If need be, simply lift up or pull down on that door to position it properly. With it held in place, we'll then tighten those screws. We're now ready to put the hinge cover back in place. Simply snap it down onto the hinge. Now, with the door securely in place, remember to turn the thermostat back to its original position. And your repair is complete.